And without further ado, I'm honored to give the floor to Gergely Karácsony, Mayor of Budapest, to deliver his opening remarks. This is also a tradition of the Budapest Forum. Thank you very much.
Dear friends, ladies and gentlemen, it is a great honor to welcome you for the 5th time to the Budapest Forum. In 2021, we organized the first forum so that Budapest would not only be linked with the destruction of democracy, but also with the making it stronger. Together with our partners, we wanted a forum to discuss democracy and sustainability openly and seriously. How can we build strong, sustainable democracies, and how can we make democratic politics serve environmental sustainability and fight the climate change? We have had significant and far-reaching discussions. We thank our partners and supporters and hope to keep working together. Our questions are becoming more relevant, which means that we ask the right questions, but also it shows that the problems have only grown worse in the past 5 years. In the economy, the concentration of the capital has continued and the balance between capital and labor has broken down. Inequality grows and social insecurity spreads even in the West. In the international relations, international law and multilateral cooperation are being placed by language of force. The climate crisis and the ecological disaster continue, just as scientists predicted. Yet more and more politicians act as if it were only a conspiracy of the liberal elite. Real global action seems less and less likely, and people are getting tired of climate anxiety. The physical and biological foundation of our civilization are in danger. Democracy is declining in almost the entire world. More and more people question values that once seemed unquestionable, like rule of law, pluralism, and tolerance. In the past 5 years, the world has become a worse place for those who believe in democracy and sustainability. We are looking for answers, but it seems we have not yet found them. And we, politicians, especially have failed to stop what is both of cause and consequence of this crisis, authoritarian right-wing populism. I want to offer you some thoughts on this topic. I don't know how original these ideas are, but I don't want to be original. I want to say what I believe to be true and important. First of all, instead of talking about crisis of democracy, shouldn't we talk about crisis of democratic parties? Instead of rise of right-wing populism, shouldn't we talk about failure of progressive politics? I call for more self-criticism of liberal progressive, including myself. The benefits of this approach is that we can focus on things we can really influence, as opposed to things beyond our control. For example, we often talk about how politics changed institutions after winning election. In Hungary too, we talk a lot about these manipulations of power, which the excellent Hungarian researcher Gábor Schering, who will speak here this afternoon, calls the hardware of populism. But to remove the hardware, we must first defeat the software, the narratives that make people support populists. We, progressive politicians, often make 3 mistakes against populism, mainly because we focus too much on the hardware rather than the software. The first, and perhaps the most common mistake, is responding to populism with elitism. Liberal elite criticize populists mainly when they break the existing consensus among political elite. Of course, we need to condemn the breaking of democratic rules, xenophobia, and the questioning the scientific facts. But if we criticize populists mainly because they break old rules, we only support the belief that populists do not belong to the elite, but represent voters against the elite. It is especially true when the contempt for populist politicians also extends to their voters. For most people, democracy doesn't mean abstract institutions, but real representation. Populists become popular because more and more people feel that the traditional elite doesn't represent them. They don't care about their real problems and worries. Elitism cannot be answer to populism. The answer is more likely what the mayor of Istanbul, Ekrem İmamoğlu, calls peopleism, a politics that seeks real solutions to ordinary people's problems. It is therefore no accident that İmamoğlu became Turkey's most popular politician and the most dangerous challenger to Erdogan. The second mistake, almost built into the fight against populism, is defending the status quo. In the most European country, the major political cleavage is between populists on the one hand and the broad coalitions led by centrists or conservatives on the others. The main message of these coalitions is defending or restoring democracy. This is, of course, an extremely important message, but it's clear does not stop the rise of populists. When they have been removed from power, like in many countries in Central and Eastern Europe, the politician pendulum swings back. If we want to break this cycle, instead of defending or restoring the old model of democracy, we should ask voters for a mandate to build a new one that gives people more involvement and protection in today's uncertain world. The third mistake, which is hard to avoid, is strengthening polarization. Social division is essential for populists. This is how they break the shared commitment to the democratic rules, and this is how they strengthen the loyalty of their supporters. It is very hard to give good answer to the sort of divisive politics. I know from personal experience how hard it is sometimes to resist the pull of hatred, but this is a huge mistake. And even bigger mistake when the progressive side blames the voters of populists too. Populists skillfully use people's problems and disappointments. It is a political gift for them when progressive politicians or opinion leaders explain the decline of democracy by the supposed ignorance of low-status voters. Because of this risk for more polarization, I also find it problematic when you talk about big cities as islands of democracy and rule of law. It is true that big cities have much stronger support for democratic and progressive politics than smaller towns, but it is partly because most big cities can benefit from globalization, and most people living there have fewer reasons for anxiety. And of course, I fully agree that city leaders must stand up for the values of democracy and sustainability, especially when national governments don't. I, myself, did this when, despite government bans and threats, we organized Budapest Pride, the largest political demonstration in Hungary since the regime change. But the image of islands shows division and dominance. It recalls the old times when cities built walls to protect their values. Now, as Pope Francis said here in Budapest, we need bridges instead of walls. Cities should not keep the values of sustainability and democracy for only themselves. They should create local governance that shows the possibility of a new, more human, more inclusive national model of democracy. At the end of my speech, let me share one idea about what could be the guideline principle of progressive urban politics. A principle that keeps its values but also attracts voters to turn to populist. This is a sense of home, a restoration of the lost homeliness. The American sociologist Ali Rachel Hatfield lived for 5 years in the right-wing community in Louisiana. She wanted to understand the deep story that turned people into loud Trump supporters, even though they gained nothing from his politics. Her book called is Stranger in Their Own Land. And the answer, they lost faith that hard work could help them rise in life because of factors completely beyond their control. They feel let down and lost the feeling of homeliness. There is a whole library of studies showing that the need for belonging is one of our most basic human needs. Azért vagyunk a világon, hogy valahol otthon legyünk benne. We are in the world to be the same, we are in the world to be home somewhere in it. This is the key line, one of the most important Hungarian novels. A home is a place that feels familiar. A place can be connected to with positive emotions and personal relationships. In the same way, a social and political order can feel like home if it provides security and stability, and if it's fair and just. It doesn't have to be perfect, but home gives meaning to our lives. A sense of home was the guiding principle behind one of the most successful progressive political projects in the last century, the Swedish welfare state. Per Albin Hansson, the legendary leader of the Swedish Social Democrats and one of the fathers of the modern Sweden, used the idea of folkhemmet, the people's home, as the central metaphor for the future Swedish society. The world-famous Hungarian Lectrin philosopher Agnes Heller was also called the philosopher of homeliness. For Heller, home was a shared cultural tradition that gave meaning to life. The politics of home building brings many practical tasks for city leaders, from tackling housing problems to improving quality of life to opening channels from citizen participation. Modern progressive concepts, the compact city, the walkable city, the 15-minute city, or the healthy streets, capture many key elements of the good life. But the politics of home, it's another crucial element. Identity, pride, exactly what many people have lost and why many vote for populists. I hope I was not misunderstood. I am convinced that the future of our civilization depends on whether we can stop the decline of democracy and whether we can create the political conditions to avoid ecological collapse. But this will not happen if the same voters keep demanding same things with growing doubt. We need to build a new social coalitions for a new sustainable democracy. How can we do this? I hope that Fifth Forum, Budapest Forum, will bring us closer to the answers. Thank you for your attention.